Greetings and welcome. This is your friend Hamid Mohammed, starring a new journey with Pride and Prejudice. How was your day, everyone? Hope it was fine. My day was kinda relaxing though. I went to work, came back home, the regular stuff. I tried to study, but I couldn't think about anything but the novel. So I picked some free domain music and I'm planning to listen to it while chatting along with you all. For a while, I would like to introduce this music while I am editing the video. So, everyone, for a fast recap, in between chapter 10 and 12, Elizabeth went to Jane after she got sick because her mother sent her sister to Mr. Bingley home and she got really sick. And it was thus a malicious way her mother thought Elizabeth might get a husband too, and would comfort herself that Jane would definitely marry Mr. Bingley. However, Darcy grew admiration for Elizabeth, but she actually didn't seem to fall for him yet. The Bingley sisters were mean as casual, especially towards Elizabeth. Between chapters 13 and 15, Mr. Collins, the very rare cousin Elizabeth and Jane and her sister have, proposed to marry one of Mr. Bennet's daughters, and just to justify that he would take the estate, the money, and all the heritage after Mr. Bennet died. Mr. Collins is really a special material for the novel. Why? Because he thinks that he is number one, the most important choice for every woman, and that he has everything and he has the perfect proposal. But actually, Elizabeth don't really care about him. In fact, while they went out to the market, when she met Mr. Wickham, she totally left him over her head. Speaking of Mr. Wickham, he's really a mean guy. Like, from what I understood, he grew up with Darcy and his sister, but he was an adopted child. Can we call him adopted? I don't know. But Mr. Darcy's father promised him, as how he might say, that he will get really a part of the heritage, probably as a clergyman, because back then clergymen used to be considered as very high in society. But after Mr. Darcy's dad passed away, Mr. Wickham didn't really get any attention from him. But so what? This is life. So he decides to go and smirk over Darcy and his sister everywhere, spills the tea, as how ChatGPT might say, and just talk fun of them. And when I say fun, I mean really bad. But this is life, and you can't really control it, you know. It's really sad because you grow up with someone, they change just because you now have the control, and they think that you are the one who changed. So it's really confusing. And you can decide if Mr. Darcy was a very bad person in this situation, but you can be sure that Mr. Wickham is a total trash bag for speaking bad about Darcy behind him, and especially the young girl, Mr. Darcy's sister. She's like 16 or 15, like man, grow up. Anyway, Elizabeth fell for his words. She became super interested in unrevealing the darkness of Mr. Darcy, which is totally like weird for a character that's like Elizabeth, but also might be explainable because she is always interested in unfolding mysteries, and Mr. Darcy is a big mystery for her. Anyway, crossing to chapter 16 and 18, the Bennet family attends a ball at Netherfield. Mr. Collins makes of himself a fool, and Elizabeth dances with Darcy, which is where too awkward because she starts to talk with him that he's really bad for being like this. Chapter 19 to 20, Mr. Collins proposes finally to Charlotte Lucas after Elizabeth had rejected his offer, and actually Charlotte accepts, and Elizabeth is shocked that her friend would marry such a ridiculous man. If I am correct, Charlotte is the woman who is the famous bar time 28. I have no money, no prospects, and this is the only offer that I might get. I don't know. Crossing to chapter 21. I kind of feel like I want to hear some Native American music. You know, this flute reminds me a lot of Native American. And it goes on and on. Public domain. I need a good website for public domain music. I have used the Internet Archive for a while, but it's not really like good for music. Some people upload really bad stuff in there. But let's start with this site called Premium Feed by Shutterstock. I know Shutterstock. This is a site for images, right? Let's see this one. Oh no, not the music watermark. It's really amazing though. Stop. If he said premiumbeat.com again, I quit. See? Okay, thank you, man. You are awesome. Thank you. Let's go back to reading. So, chapter 21. The discussion of Mr. Collins' offer was now nearly at an end, and Elizabeth had only to suffer from the uncomfortable feelings necessary attending it, and occasionally from some peevish allusions of her mother. As for the gentleman himself, his feelings were chiefly expressed not by embarrassment or dejection, or by trying to avoid her, but by stiffness of manner and resentful silence. He scarcely ever spoke to her, and the assiduous attentions which he had been so sensible of himself were transferred for the rest of the day to Miss Lucas, whose civility in listening to him was a seasonable relief to them all, and especially to her friend. Which actually is so interesting. Mr. Collins just want to get married, and it's so weird. Like he doesn't even consider if he likes the woman or not. He just wanna get married. He's not a simple man. He is really a weird man. Anyway, the moral produced no abatement of Mrs. Bennet's ill humour or ill health. Mr. Collins was also in the same stage of angry pride. Elizabeth had hoped that his resentment might shorten his visit, but his plan did not appear in the least affected by it. He was always to have gone on Saturday, and to Saturday he meant to stay. After breakfast, the girls walked to Meryton to inquire if Mr. Wickham were returned, and to lament over his absence from the Netherfield ball. He joined them on their entering the town, and attended them to their aunt's, where his regret and vexation, and the concern of everybody was well talked over. To Elizabeth, however, he voluntarily acknowledged that the necessity of his absence had been self-imposed. "I found," said he, as the time drew near, "that I had better not meet Mr. Darcy; that to be in the same room, the same party with him, for so many hours together, might be more than I could bear, and that scenes might arise unpleasant to more than myself." She highly approved his forbearance, and they had leisure for a full discussion of it, and for all the commendations which they civilly bestowed on each other, as Wickham and another officer walked back with them to Longport, and during the walk he particularly attended to her. His accompany his accompanying them was a double advantage. She felt all the compliment offered to herself, and it was most acceptable as an occasion of introducing him to her father and mother. Okay, I feel like there's some parts that I don't understand, so I have to go check my translator. So let's switch. Forbearance means patience. So yeah, that's great. Anyway, soon after their return, a letter was delivered to Miss Bennet. It came from Netherfield. The envelope contained a sheet of elegant little half-pressed paper, well covered with a lady's fair, flowing hand, and Elizabeth's soft sister's countenance changed as she read it, and saw her dwelling intently on some particular passage. Jane recollected herself soon, and putting the letter away, tried to join with her usual cheerfulness in the general conversation. But Elizabeth felt an anxiety on the subject which drew off her attention, even from Wickham, and no sooner had he and his companion taken leave than a glance from Jane invited her to follow. When they had gained their own room, Jane, talking out the letter, said, "This is from Caroline Bingley. What it contains has surprised me a good deal. The whole party have left Petersfield by this time, and are on their way to town, and without any intention of coming back again. You shall hear what she says." Then read the first sentence aloud, which comprised the information of their having just resolved to follow their brother to town directly, and of their meaning to dine in Grosvenor Street, where Mr. Hurst had a house. The next was in these words: "I do not pretend to regret anything. I shall live in Hertfordshire, accept your society, my dearest friend, but we will hope at some future period to enjoy many returns of that delightful intercourse we have known, and in the meanwhile may lessen the pain of separation by a very frequent and most unreserved correspondence. I depend on you for that." To these high-flown expressions Elizabeth listened with all the insensibility of distrust, and though the suddenness of their removal surprised her, she saw nothing in it really to lament. It was not to be supposed that their absence from Netherfield would prevent Mr. Bingley's being there, and as to the last party, she was persuaded that Jane must cease to regret it in the enjoyment of his. "It's unlikely," said she, after a short pause, "that you should not be able to see your friends before they leave the country. But may we not hope that the period of the future happiness to which Miss Bingley looks forward may arrive earlier than she is aware, and that the delightful intercourse you have known as friends will be renewed with yet greater satisfaction as sisters. Mr. Bingley will not be detained in London by them. Caroline decidedly says that none of the party will return into Hertfordshire this winter. I read it to you. When my brother left us yesterday, he imagined that the business which took him to London might be concluded in 3 or 4 days, but as we are certain it cannot be so, and at the same time convinced that when Charles gets to town he will be in no hurry to leave it again, we have determined on following him safe, that he may not be obliged to spend his vacant hour in a comfortless hotel. Many of my acquaintances are already there for the winter. I wish that I could hear you, my dearest friend, had any intention of making one of the crowd, but of that I expire. I sincerely hope your Christmas in Hertfordshire may abound in the gaieties which the season generally brings, and that your pew will be so numerous as to prevent your feeling the loss of the three of whom we shall deprive you. It is evident by this, added Jane, that he comes back no more this winter. It is only evident that Miss Bingley does not mean that he should. Why will you think so? It must be his own doing. He is his own master, but you do not know all. I will read you the passage which particularly hurts me. I will have no reserves from you. Mr. Darcy is impatient to see his sister, and to confess the truth, we are scarcely less eager to meet her again. I really do not think Georgina Darcy has her equal for beauty, elegance, and accomplishments, and the affection she inspires in Louisa and myself is hiding into something still more interesting from the hope we dare entertain of her being hereafter. Or sister, I do not know whether I have ever before mentioned to you my feelings on this subject, but I will not leave the country without confiding them, and I trust you will not esteem them unreasonable. My brother admires her greatly already. He will have frequent opportunity now of seeing her on the most intimate footing. Her relations all wish the connection as much as his own, and as sisters, but partiality is not misleading me. I think when I call Charles most capable of engaging any woman's heart, with all these circumstances to favor an attachment and nothing to prevent it, am I wrong, my dearest Jane, in indulging the hope of an event which will secure the happiness of so many? What do you think of this sentence, my dear Lizzie? Said Jane, as she finished it. It's not clear enough, does it not? Does it not expressly declare that Caroline neither expects nor wishes me to be her sister? That she is perfectly convinced of her brother's indifference, and that if she suspects the nature of my feelings for him, she means most kindly to put me on my guard. Can there be any other opinion on the subject? Yes, there can, for mine is totally different. Will you hear it? Most willingly. You shall have it in few words. Miss Bingley sees that her brother is in love with you, and wants him to marry Miss Darcy. You shall have it in few words. Miss Bingley sees that her brother is in love with you, and wants him to marry Miss Darcy. She follows him to town in hope of keeping him there, and tries to persuade you that he does not care about you. Jane shook her head. Indeed, Jane, you ought to believe me. No one who has ever seen you together can doubt his affection. Miss Bingley, I am sure I cannot. She is not such a simpleton. Could have she seen half as much love in Mr. Darcy for herself, she would have ordered her wedding clothes, but the case is this. We are not rich enough or grand enough for them, and she is the more anxious to get Miss Darcy for her brother, from the notion that when there has been one intermarriage, she may have less trouble in achieving a second, in which there is certainly some ingenuity, and I dare say it would succeed if Mr. Brock were out of the way. But, my dearest Jane, you cannot seriously imagine that because Miss Bingley tells you her brother greatly admires Miss Darcy, he is in the smallest degree less sensible of your merit than when he took leave of you on Tuesday, or that it will be in her power to persuade him that in a state of being in love with you, he is very much in love with her friend. "If we thought alike of Miss Bingley," replied Jane, "your representation of all this might make me quite easy. But I know the foundation is unjust. Caroline is incapable of willfully deceiving anyone, and all is unjust. And all that I can hope in this case is that she is deceiving herself. That is right. You could not have started a more happy idea, since you will not take comfort in mine. Believe her to be deceived by all means. You have now done your duty by her, and must fret no longer. But, my dear sister, can I be happy, even supposing that best in accepting a man whose sisters and friends are all wishing him to marry elsewhere? You must decide for yourself, said Elizabeth, and if upon mature deliberation you find that the misery of disobliging his two sisters is more than equivalent to the happiness of being his wife, I advise you by all means to refuse him. How can you talk so? Said Jane, faintly smiling. You must know that I thought I should be exceedingly grieved at their disapprobation. I could not hesitate. I do not think you would, and that being the case, I cannot consider your situation with much compassion. But if he returns no more this winter, my choice will never be required. A thousand things may arise in 6 months. The idea of his returning no more, Elizabeth treated, was the utmost contempt. It appeared to her merely the suggestion of Caroline's interested wishes, and she could not for a moment suppose that those wishes, however openly or artfully spoken, could influence a young man so totally independent of everyone. She represented to her sister as forcibly as possible what she felt on the subject, and had soon the pleasure of seeing its happy effect. Jane's temper was not desponding, and she was gradually led to hope, though the difference of affection sometimes overcame the hope that Bingley would return to Netherfield and answer every wish of her heart. They agreed that Mrs. Bennet should only hear of the departure of the family without being alarmed on the score of the gentleman's conduct. But even this partial communication gave her a great deal of concern, and she bewailed it as exceedingly unlucky that the ladies should happen to go away just as they were all getting so intimate together. After lamenting it, however, with some length, she had the consolation that Mr. Bingley would be soon down again, and soon dining at Longbourn, and the conclusion of all was that comfortable declaration that though he had been invited only to a family dinner, she would take care to have two full courses. End of chapter 21. Check the messages if someone saw my record and might explore other things. Alright, you guys, so I'm going to read chapter 22, and then I might hop up to read something else, but let's connect to a music. You can hear it right now. 1 second. So this is Beethoven, Symphony number 5. It reminds me of my school, music class, whatever. And this is good for the voice, I think, I guess. Yeah. Oh no, the watermark kills me. Anyway, chapter 22. The Bennets were engaged to dine with the Lucases, and again during the shift of the day was Miss Lucas Ewing, so kind as to listen to Mr. Collins. Elizabeth took an opportunity of thanking her. It keeps him in good humor, said she, and I'm more obliged to you than I can express. Charlotte assured her friend of her satisfaction in being, and that it amply repaid her for the latter's sacrifice of times. This was very amiable, but Charlotte's time was extended farther than Elizabeth had any conception of it. Its object was nothing else than to secure her from any return to Mr. Collins' address. I can't. I'm so sick. I guess that I have to end the stream because I'm getting depressed. Goodbye.